Welcome back. This is John Locke, and today I'm looking at this article. This is from this person's name. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but the person's name is Kaspar Szymanski. This is published a few days ago. So this is busting some SEO myths. I just wanted to give my thoughts on this, like off the cuff, like while they're still fresh in my mind after reading this. Okay, so he starts by saying every industry has myths, so does the SEO world. Here's 10 of the most common myths. Uh, and this is from a longtime Google search employee and SEO expert. So the first one, SEO is a level playing field. I hope nobody thinks that it actually is. Um, so in theory, SEO is a fair competition where every website stands the same chance to compete for queries. It hasn't been for a long time. It will never be fair again. We've talked about this many, many times on this channel. How since 2008, they pretty much said that bigger brands are going to be favored a little bit more because they're more trustworthy. They've been around, they're established, they have a little bit more credibility. And, given the choice between two pages and two sites that are otherwise equal, Google is always going to go with the big brand. I mean, that's what they said in 2008. But this person, Casper, here says different websites show different on and off page SEO signals, of course. And so consequently, they rank different. And these signals include, but they're not limited to page performance, technical setup, the given slots for organic lit spots in a search result page, and the backlink profile. And these are all things that can be measured. But it's never back to square one for everyone. So if you want to compete in SEO, it's a long-term game. It's something that you need to work on, and especially if you're in a heavy competition vertical, the heavier the competition, the longer you're going to have to work at it. Now, he says that it is true that Google grants brand new domains a honeymoon period, and this is a brief moment in which the website ranks well, despite not having accumulated any sufficient signals yet. And Google will push sites, the new sites. Sometimes they'll push sites that they haven't given a push to and put them a little bit higher because they got to get signals. They have to see whether those pages satisfy queries and whether they satisfy real users. So they do have to give these sites a push. But during this grace period, that's if you do well during that time, you might stick around up near the top. But once you drop, Google has gathered sufficient data confirming that new website's where it should slot. And new websites do get a little help when they first start out, but no, it's not a level playing field competition. I mean, there's brands that have been around for like hundreds of years. Like there's brands that have been around for like literally hundreds of years. And there's websites that have been around that belong to some of those brands that have been around for, since the dawn of the web. So, almost 30 years. So, if you're one of those brands, you might have a huge advantage. If you've been around like 20 years, you're going to have some advantages that a brand new site doesn't. So if you're a new site, you have to think about other ways that you can outdo more incumbent sites. Okay, so myth number 2, SEO is a one-time project. I sincerely hope that nobody thinks this. A lot of people think that once you get SEO dialed in and once your site is ranking for all your target terms, that's it, and you never have to work on it again, or you don't have to work on it again for like a long time. That is way not true, because basically everybody that's underneath you is hungry too, and they want to rank too, and they're going to be working hard on SEO, and I see it all the time. when people see you succeed, and they try and figure out how you did it, and they try and backwards engineer it. And it happens a lot. So don't ever think that you can kick back and just coast once you get to number one in Google, because there's always going to be people that are trying just as hard, and they see you kick back. It's just like Rocky Balboa in Rocky 3. When you start coasting, and that's when these other sites that want to do well, they come up in and snatch that number one ranking from you. So anyway, myth number 3: SEO is backlinks. You still need backlinks, and you still should have relevant backlinks from sites that are topically related to yours. That's a fact. If you have no backlinks, you're not going to rank. So this is a little misleading, but let's look at what he says. So without links, most search engines would not be able to find and crawl new content. And he admits, for Google, backlinks also represent a ranking signal. But contrary to popular perception, backlinks may harm website rankings. So what he points out are manual spam actions, like penalties from the web spam team, somebody manually saying this is a spammy link profile and we're going to do something about it. But there's also algorithmic penalties like Penguin that looked for spammy links and destroyed a lot of private blog networks. But Penguin is an ongoing algorithm. It continually updates in the Google ranking algorithm. So links should be based on merit and not, paid or link building schemes. Even though that there's companies out there that they build their whole company on basically saying like, hey, we sell paid links. I don't know. So if you earn the links, and as we'll talk about, as we'll show down later, if when people get to your page, it's proving that link was deserved, then it will be okay. But it's not just about page rank in the highest page ranked site or the highest domain authority or whatever these SEO tools metrics are. It's not about that anymore. This is the clue right here. Backlinks should be actively pursued, however, not for an illusionary page rank gain, but to grow conversions, which is the primary purpose for optimizing website. That's the clue. Optimize for conversions. Grow conversions. And it does not pose a risk that the site may be penalized and disappear from the ranking pages altogether, the search results pages. Now here's a point that I wanted to touch on here, because he says Google does leave a door open for sites that had been in violation with Google linking policies at some point by providing the disavow tool, which allows a website to disassociate from undesirable backlinks. Now, I want to key in on what he just said here. Google leaves the door open for sites that had been in violation with linking policies. This is a lifeline. The disavow tool is a lifeline for sites that screwed up big time. So I know there's a lot of people that believe that the reason why their page, the reason why their site is not ranking is because they're getting all these spammy backlinks from scraper sites and this site and that site. Guess what? Every site that's halfway popular gets the same types of links. Those scraper site links and these so-called toxic links, the tools like SEMrush tell you to disavow. You're wasting your time. You're expending your energy on something that is very common to the web. Google pretty much ignores it. The disavow tool is there for sites that screwed up royally. That's what it's there for. So when you disavow stuff and you're spending, like every other week or every other month, you're uploading like another disavow tool another disavow file because you're certain that if you tell Google, no, we didn't build these spammy links and I'm going to disavow these links, that's the reason why you're not ranking, I can guarantee you that that's nothing to do with why you're not ranking. Google pretty much ignores these because they're a very common thing on the web. Stop expending energy on the disavow tool. Gary Iles, Google representative, even said this at PubCon, that they were taking the disavow tool out of Google Search Console because so many people were shooting themselves in the foot with it. So he said this on stage, and this was like maybe 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, it's a lifeline for sites that screwed up and intentionally built a bunch of black hat links. If you're just getting normal links that you didn't pay for, don't waste one iota of energy on the disavow tool or even thinking about it. Doesn't matter. That's not why you're not ranking. Myth number 4: SEO is SEO is user signals. Now this headline is a little misleading. There's a couple headlines, sub-headlines here that are a little misleading. This is one of them. Because he starts off right away and he says it's wrong to assume that user signals are unimportant. They're a relevant SEO factor. Google's entire business model rests on user loyalty. Google measures its user happiness and utilizes the data in order to improve its product. In that sense, user signals truly are a factor. Yes, of course they are. How else can you grade half the sites in the world? And what I mean by that is only half the sites in the world use Google Analytics. There's literally billions of sites that don't use Google Analytics. How are those sites measured? They have to measure user signals in another way. So he says that user signals are important. But he says something very revealing right here. He said, therefore, he says Google does not share the data that they use, not even with the verified Google Search Console site operator. So the data that they get, they do not share with you. The user signals that Google uses, they do not share with you. So there's some mystery here. Therefore, we're left with Google Search Console impressions and click-through rate as the only confirmed indicators regarding user perception of the site and their behavior. These are the only indicators that they're giving you to go by, impressions and click-through rate. So while the combination, he goes on to say, while the combination of high impression volume and low click-through rate usually indicates that user signals can be improved, these limited insights are only one part of a much bigger SEO picture. How and if they can be improved depends primarily on the website's unique selling proposition, which is by far more important. So that's a very interesting statement to put here. That the insights that you see in Google Search Console are only one part of a bigger SEO picture. But the other thing that he says, if they can be improved, depends primarily on the website's unique selling proposition. So what you actually have on the website. I think that's something to think about. Okay. So myth number 5, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. The myth that Google hates your website. Now, Google is... Google employees, I mean, there's not enough to go through every website on the earth. People think that Google has it out for them personally. We've seen people in Congress say stuff like they think there's a man behind the curtain. I mean, a bunch of geezers that don't know how technology works. Yes, these are the people who should be running our country. But I digress. The Google ranking algorithm, it is based on probabilities. I mean, you really have to think about like this, like an engineer. They don't have people evaluating site by site. The web is way too big. The web has been way too big for like a long time to have it be like that. So if you really think about it, what the Google ranking algorithm does is based on the sets of data that it's had in the past for a given query. Let's say you type in a certain phrase into Google. Based on the data sets of pages that's encountered in the past, is your page a high probability or a low probability to satisfy people's query? Are they going to find what they came to find? Are they going to be able to do what they said on the content of the page? It's going to base it on, how fast your page loads. I mean, I'm sure that in the data somewhere it's, they see that people that come to a page that loads very slowly are not happy. And there's things that they do when they're not happy. What is the subject matter of your site overall? Does your site overall cover a subject to where if people type in a certain phrase or a certain query, is your site well equipped to satisfy that? So, for example, if you had a site on industrial power tools or something like that, if somebody had a question about a recipe, or if they had a question about, should I take my dog to the vet or something like that, your website is not going to be a good candidate for answering that question because your site doesn't deal with that subject matter material. Backlinks are also part of this probability calculation. Sites that have a lot of links from other sites that are topically related probably means that that site has a high probability of answering that question. So think about it like this, your page, Google is looking for a lot of things that are on the page as well. They're looking for things on the page, the words on the page. We'll talk about this in a minute. They're looking for elements on the page, the subject matter of your site as a whole, backlink profile, all these little technical things. Yeah, that's part of it too. But in the end, it's looking at the probability that your page is going to satisfy the majority of people who are typing in a specific search query. And a page that is, at or near the top of page 1 probably has a higher probability that it's going to satisfy people and get them to complete the task that they're trying to do than a site that's on page 10. So think about it like this. How would you do it if you were an engineer? What types of things would you be looking for in a page? How would you measure billions of pages? Okay, so complete indifference toward websites. Google's just way too big. No person behind the curtain. We'll move on. Right. Myth number 6, Google AdWords has an impact on SEO. Now, a lot of people will talk about if you link up your AdWords and you link up your Google Analytics and you spend enough money, then you can, see some of the keywords that people are coming to your site with, and that keyword not provided is unlocked. But as a direct effect, they're kind of separate. Now, some people will say brand awareness, it's an indirect effect. If people see your brand name in the ads at the top of the page enough times, then maybe they'll click on your thing eventually. So indirect. But what this engineer is saying is natural search is fiercely independent of paid search. They try and keep them separate because otherwise, antitrust lawsuit, there's going to be government regulation, and the last thing Google wants is a lawsuit and government regulation, so they have to keep those things separate. Okay, myth number 7. Now, this is the most confusing one that I saw when I was reading this, and I think you'll understand why. Because there are some contradictions in here, but he says some things that are kind of cryptic. So before I go into this paragraph, I'm just going to tell you that some of the things here that he's saying, I'm putting in the back of my brain for now because I don't necessarily see everything that he's trying to say without saying it outright. So I'm going to put some of these things that he's saying in the back of my brain, and I'm going to go out and observe SEO and maybe eventually it'll dawn on me what he's saying. But okay, so he says keywords are key. But then he goes on to say, in the infancy of search engines back in the day, they relied heavily on the density of keywords on landing pages to correlate their relevance to queries. Of course, that's all they had to go on. They figured if they were unsophisticated, search engines were very unsophisticated compared to what they are now. So they just figured, if the keyword is repeated, 20 times on the page, then the page must be about that. And that's how they started. But that was a long time ago. That was like in the early 90s and stuff. So fast forward 20 years, keywords have lost much of their SEO importance. Like I said, it's too easy of a signal to game. Too easy of a signal to game. You can just keyword stuff the whole page. Too easy to manipulate. So Google has always been ignoring meta keywords. Now that is a tag. It's a hidden tag in the HTML that some tools will let you put that in there still, but Google as well as Bing and all the other search engines have ignored that since the mid 90s. So all that really does is tell your competitors the exact keywords that you're trying to rank for. That's it. So the meta keywords tag. So while they crawl and index, while Google crawls and indexes collapsed and behind tabs content, which is something that has been in the last like 5 years or so, they tend not to rank sites for content, including keywords not visible to users. So this is the first interesting thing. So they tend to not rank sites for content, including keywords not visible to users. You're not ranking sites for content. That's an interesting statement to make, because I know that keywords are important and you do have to have keywords in the page. And if you don't have keywords in the page at all, it makes it a lot more difficult to rank. So there's some things here to really think about, and I'm not sure exactly what he's saying. I'll freely admit. Okay, so keywords and URLs are not being used for ranking purposes either. So he's saying that if you have the keyword in the URL, it doesn't give it a boost. I guess I could see that. So if you think about it from this perspective, any signal that can be easily gamed or manipulated is probably not a good signal, and this could be one. You could keyword stuff the URL, I suppose. So I think probably what they're doing is looking at the rest of the page minus the URL, I guess. I don't know. So he goes on to say, keywords are unlikely to have any desirable impact on click-through rate, especially in comparison with rich snippet breadcrumbs, which do help users navigate. So if you've ever seen search results and there's breadcrumbs on the page, you'll see the breadcrumbs, but you won't see the actual destination URL. You'll just see the breadcrumbs leading up to that in the actual search result. So I think what he's saying is that is more beneficial, and it tells people where it is in the architecture of the site. I don't know. But he says the times of counting keywords on pages and attempting to identify a fleeting ideal ratio are a thing of the past. I know there's SEO software out there that tries to do this, find the ideal keyword ratio. But I think that they're trying to move toward more solving a problem, search intent, task completion, a sort of thing. So if you get people to the goal that they're trying to get to, I think that that's what they're going by more so. Okay, now there's some really interesting things here. And this is what I'm trying to figure out, what he's saying. Content which can be represented by data as much as written words is important for the context of the website. However, keywords are not relevant. So the first part of the sentence, he says, content which can be represented by data as much as written words. Maybe that's a clue that it's not just about text, but there's other forms of data. Could be tools, could be calculators, could be videos, could be audio, could be anything, could be graphics, could be images. This is all data. I think that that's what he's trying to say with that. I could be wrong, but that's my interpretation of it. He said that that is important for the context of the website. But he closes by saying this in bold. However, keywords are not relevant. My first instinct, and I read this a few times, and my first instinct is to say what I think he means is keywords alone by themselves on a page are not relevant by themselves in isolation. I think what he's trying to say, and I could be wrong, I could be completely missing the mark, but I think what he's actually trying to say is Google is trying to emulate like how a human would look at this. So if it's a keyword stuffed page, that's not going to be as relevant as a page that has data that is useful to humans, because it gets them to whatever their intended goal is. But I could be completely off. I'm gonna think on this statement a lot more. Okay, so myth number 8, SEO is freshness. And he says, yes, Google seems to be fond of content freshness. However, only when freshness is a factor to user intent, and that's in bold. And I tend to agree with this. Now, he says, for sites operating in fast-paced news, vertical freshness can translate into a competitive advantage. So that means a small selection of actual news outlets like newspapers, magazines, or portals. But for the overwhelming majority of websites, freshness is not as important as an SEO factor, and no amount of changing publishing dates on old articles is going to convince Google that it's fresh content. So consequently, other than for news sites, freshness is not important. And I think what he is saying here, because I have heard people say this before, that if you change the published date, that, it'll rank higher. Think of it like this for all the developers that are watching this, if you're a web developer. Think of like when Google crawls a page as if you're doing a git commit. Say you're like committing like a merge in Git. There's the old version, right? And then there's the new version. And Google looks at the two versions of the page from the last time it crawled that page, and then the new version, say you changed it. Or maybe you didn't change it. Maybe you just changed the publish date. Google can compare those two very easily, and say, this is what changed or this is what didn't change. What I have found personally is when you change pages and you add things that add more information, or they add more useful things, things that are useful to people that are searching, maybe things that people are actually, also find useful on that page, that can be good. I've also found sometimes that if you take things away from a page that are extraneous and they're not focused on the actual task at hand, that can also affect the page and make it go higher. So I think it all depends. There are clues out there in the actual search rankings. But I think what he's saying here is if you're changing the publish date, then that's a hack. And that is a tactic to try and manipulate, and it's an easily gamed signal. I think how you really have to look at SEO is if a signal can be easily gamed, if it can be easily manipulated, or if it can be construed as a trick, and you're not actually doing anything to improve the page or change the page substantially in any other way, then it's probably not a good signal. So there's a lot of things that fall underneath that, and we're going to talk about some more in the next bullet point here, which is myth number 9, social signals are a SEO factor. Now he addresses exactly what I was thinking when I saw this, so let me go through it. So what he says is comments, likes, votes, and social media engagement of any sort, including links emanating from social media channels like Facebook or Twitter, like how many shares you do of a page, contrary to popular theories, are not contributing to SEO as a ranking factor. Now there's a couple of reasons for this. The reason being is about 4 or 5 years ago, they had contracts with some of the different social media channels to have a fire hose of information, meaning that they had direct access to their feed as it was coming in. So they had these contracts with Facebook, Twitter, might have been some other ones at the time. I know that right now, I believe that they still have contracts with Twitter and Pinterest. What happened several years ago is their contract with Facebook to have a unfettered access to the data stream in real time. Their contract with Facebook ended. And from that, they learned a lesson that they could not rely on social media platforms and having access to those streams in real time, because it is a dependency that could break. So they do not rely on that. The other thing that he said here is comments, likes, votes, and social media engagement do not contribute to SEO as a ranking factor directly. And this goes back to the thing that we were just saying. Any signal that can be manipulated or gamed easily should not be a good factor. It's not a good factor if you can go to Fiverr and pay somebody money and have them game the system. It's not a good signal if you can pay somebody to do an Amazon Mechanical Turk and game the system. Now, last week we had a video where we talked about two companies that just settled with the Federal Trade Commission because one company, they were doing fake reviews for their own products and downvoting like negative reviews on their products. And then another company, they had a whole bunch of like sister companies, and they were selling Facebook views or YouTube views. They were selling like Twitter likes and Twitter subscribers and Facebook followers and Facebook likes and all these things. You go on Fiverr and you can see all these things as well. You know, we'll give you like 100 likes for like $20 or whatever. So any signal like that that can be gamed is a bad signal, because it means that people can black hat it and they can spam it and they can hack it. And that's not what Google wants, because if they have a bunch of bogus search results, then people are going to they're going to lose market share to Bing and DuckDuckGo, and then people aren't going to spend as much on AdWords. So they want people to stay on Google. They want people to stay on that. They want to retain market share, because that means more people are going to spend money on ads. Okay. So he goes on to say here too, it's not to say that social media signals are irrelevant to online marketing. This is something that I've said. Nobody told me this. It's just something that I observed. That real companies, large companies, big brands look for different ways to do customer acquisition. And they might spend money on TV commercials and billboards and print ads, radio ads, and social media. So the largest brands in the world, they have social media channels, and they've claimed all the ones that have their name. They have all their social channels set up, and they're trying to reach users, and they're trying to acquire customers and raise brand awareness on social media. So in that regard, having social media channels is important, because I do believe that it is a marker that Google looks for as far as differentiating a small brand from a big brand. So anyway, the engineer goes on to say, Google is not taking social media factors into account for good reasons. Most importantly, the data available is fragmented and unreliable, what we were just talking about with contracts. However, there are good reasons to consider social media outreach operations an integral part of brand building, what I just said. Raises brand awareness. So while social media does nothing to boost rankings directly, it has a great long-term effect on factors that do matter for SEO. Brand recognition and loyalty is established with superb products and services, or providing a unique selling proposition. That's the second time you said that phrase. So that's code for something. Okay, so that's the second time you said that. providing a unique selling proposition with two-way communication and a feedback channel. So brand websites that aspire to become leaders in their vertical with a social media strategy have a tangible advantage when competing with other websites for user attention in the Google search engine results pages. In short, social media helps to boost brand recognition and click-through rate, which matters for SEO. And Google, while not admitting in so many words publicly, still shows a preference for websites that are popular with users. So what he's saying is the number of likes or shares or upvotes or comments that a particular, if you share like a page on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, it's not going to count how many retweets or how many hearts or how many stars or how many likes it has. That's not going to play a factor in it raising up. But you should absolutely, he's saying 100%, you should have social media channels and be active on them with users. And if you don't do that, you're probably a small brand, I think is what he's saying here. Based on what I've seen, what happens when you add social channels and are somewhat active on them, it makes a difference. So anyway, last one. SEO is magic. Of course that's a myth. SEO is work, man. It's not magic. It's not fairy dust. It is work. You can't push a button and do SEO. You can't Salt Bay your way to like good SEO. So he says, lastly, search engine optimization complexity is occasionally reduced to statements indicating SEO is both an art and a science, and it makes it difficult to understand. Portraying SEO as too complex to explain is not beneficial, let alone accurate. Yes, SEO is data-driven, and frequently the amounts of data required to address an issue can be immense. At the same time, there are a multitude of signals, both on and off page, that can conflict with each other. Because SEO is so data-driven, even complex problems can be broken down into small, manageable data chunks to be analyzed and explained. On the chance of robbing the SEO industry of some of its magic, there is no voodoo involved, and at the end of the day, almost every SEO signal can be broken down to key performance indicators that can be explained. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on this article. There's a lot of things that I found interesting, a lot of things that I agree with, a lot of things that were confirming things that I already thought. You know, the SEO is backlinks thing, the SEO is user signals, and the keywords are key. These were the most interesting sections. I think a lot of people will interpret these a lot of different ways. But those were the most interesting sections in this to me, and it gave me food for thought. My name is John Locke. My business is Lockedown Design and SEO, and I'm here every single day making videos on SEO. I want to thank everybody who has subscribed recently. We're at 400 subscribers. You can see that. Pretty awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.